Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Lindsay and you're watching my channel, A Sight to See. Today is a very exciting day because it is the day that you decided that you're gonna start planning your European backpacking adventure. Now, this video could be for anybody, whether you already started planning your European trip and just wanted to get some insight from somebody who's already done it, or if you think backpacking Europe is walking through Europe with a backpack on, like my family thought before I went. But in this video, I'm going to go over step by step everything that I did leading up to my departure day for Europe. And generally, I'd say you would want to start planning at least 6 months before you go, depending on how fast you can make money. I'm going to post a link to my vlog in the description below about how I saved up money for this trip, but that's a separate topic. So we're just gonna jump right into it. First thing you're gonna want to do is go to your computer and open up Google Maps. And we are going to take a look at Europe. I think it's a good idea to just look at Europe as a whole while you're starting this to kind of put into perspective where everything is on the map and how far away everything is from each other. One thing that I personally like to do is just look how far away one point is from another point by either train or a car, to just kind of familiarize yourself with how big of a continent that we're dealing with. Okay, so this should start giving you some inspiration. You look at all the countries that you've been wanting to go to for so long. You see Italy, you see Spain, France, Germany, Ireland. Wow, Europe has so many beautiful, amazing countries. And it also has countries that you may not have heard too much about in the news, but are still amazingly beautiful. Like, for instance, Slovenia. Really beautiful country that I had never even heard of before going to Europe. Anyway, we are going to write out a quick list of every country that you want to see. And you can also take this opportunity to look at countries on Google Maps of places you might have not heard of before. Like, let's click on Estonia. That's not a country that I had heard of even when I was in Europe. And honestly, now it's kind of a country I wish I did go to. There's a lot of countries that I wished I went to, but I only went to 14. Okay, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. 14 is a lot of countries. But anyway, start writing down a list of every country that you want to see. You could be over-exaggerated right now. We are in step 1. So just for fun, I made a list of 20 countries. Okay, time for step 2. Now you have all of your countries written down. The next most important thing is to learn how expensive those countries are. For example, the most expensive country I visited when I was in Europe was Switzerland. I spent a lot of time in Switzerland, and honestly, I could have stretched my money out a lot longer if I went to countries, say, of more in like Eastern Europe. What you're basically gonna want to do now is list your countries in order from most expensive to least expensive. And the way I usually do that is by looking up hostels and hotels and seeing the average price of how much you would spend in one night there. Because when you think about it, what you really are going to need when you're traveling is transportation, a place to stay, and food, and of course activities, which will become extra. But the most important thing you're going to need is a place to stay every night, especially if it's your first time in a foreign country and you're alone and it's just nice to have a place to stay. The most expensive hostel I stayed at was $57 a night in Switzerland, and the cheapest one I stayed at was $7 a night in Hungary. So there was a pretty big difference in those. So I basically wrote out the average price for the hostel in each one of the countries, and that kind of shows how expensive of an area I'm going to be staying in. This also kind of gives you an idea for your future itinerary of how long you can stay in a place. Alright, step 3 is getting ready to choose your means of transportation. Now, there are plenty of ways that you can travel based on your budget. The most expensive way to travel, I would say, would be renting a car. I'm almost 25, so I'm not gonna have that young driver's fee for very much longer, but at the least, renting a car is usually like $25 to $30 a day, right? And if you're planning on traveling for months, that adds up really fast. That's $100 every 4 days, minimum. And there are a lot of days that you might just want to chill and walk around the city and you're not gonna have the needs for a car. Hey, if you have the budget for it, by all means, go ahead and do it, but there are definitely cheaper options as well. I took the train all around Europe. It cost me about, I'm just gonna round up and say $1,000 for 3 months of travel. In actuality, I think it was more like $900, but I'm just gonna say I probably spent about $100 on Ubers the entire time. That got me to places where the train couldn't. But Europe's trains are definitely a lot better than America's trains, I will definitely say that. I could get from small town to small town. Here, And if trains aren't your thing, you can actually fly really cheaply around Europe from big city to big city, but that does take away going into smaller parts of cities. For example, if you wanted to go and travel Switzerland, you could get to Zurich or Bern, but you couldn't go to Interlaken or Lauterbern and like where I went, where I saw those beautiful mountains, because you need to get on a train or you need to rent a car or an Uber, and in that case, I'd say the train is definitely the cheapest option. So once you've picked your means of transportation, we're going to move on to step 4, which is looking at plane tickets. I love looking at plane tickets. It's like a hobby. But the thing that I was most concerned about when going to Europe, of course, is the price. I was not buying a round trip ticket because it would be kind of stupid to leave in the same place that I got to because I had already seen there, and why would I circle back around to the first place that I went to just to get on another plane when there are airports everywhere? So I chose flying into Ireland, mainly because Ireland is separate and I would also have to take another plane to get to Ireland. If I, say, flew into Spain, I would have to fly to Ireland and then fly back to the rest of Europe. That didn't make much sense, so I decided to go to Ireland first so I could just hop on a plane and then do the rest of Europe after that. But another big factor in me starting in Ireland was how cheap the plane ticket was to get there. I had looked at flights from my airport to every single airport in every city that I had looked at in Europe, and I saw which one was the cheapest. And I also only bought one plane ticket at a time. So I bought my ticket to depart from the United States to Europe. Because then once I got to Ireland, I kind of understood a little bit more about Europeans' airlines, and I picked the best one with the baggage that I had after what I had learned since I got there. And then I kept looking at tickets to go back home. I was actually flying to Denver, and I had looked from every single airport in each city that I was going to in Europe while I was already there, and I saw that Paris was the best to leave out of. It was the only place that could offer me a non-stop flight from Paris to Denver, and it only cost me like $250, which I thought was a great deal. So basically what you're gonna wanna do is find the cheapest airport that you could fly into and make that the starting point of your trip. Unless for some reason it's super inconvenient, but most of the time as a solo backpacker, you can really make anything work with your schedule. All right, step 5 is going to be you deciding how long you wanna travel for. I mean, you're planning a backpacking adventure, which usually means you're gonna be traveling for more than 1 week and probably even more than 1 month. But really the deciding factor is how long you think you can afford to stay away without it breaking your bank. So I initially chose to travel for 6 months, but I decided to come home a month early so I could have that last month's budget to kind of start over back here in the United States instead of starting with nothing. And that's one thing you kind of want to plan for. You want to make sure that you come back with something because it's kind of hard to work with zero unless you're the type of person that puts things on credit cards, which I am not. So if you think about your spending monthly at home, if you are a person like me who is single living in their own apartment and doesn't have anybody else to take care of, my monthly spending is probably about $2,000. And that's talking rent, utilities, car insurance, food, gas, entertainment, going out with friends. I'd say I spend about $2,000 a month on average when I'm not extremely saving for a big trip like this. Kind of the same goes for when you're out traveling. When I added up how much it would cost me every day to rent a hostel and adding in the price of saying maybe $20 a day for food, and most of the time I did go to the grocery store to get food. I didn't go out to eat every day. I did when I could afford it, but that was definitely not every day and definitely not every country. So I basically budgeted $2,300 a month when I was in Europe. I decided to, keep timing that by 2, by 3, by 4, and when I hit 14 grand was when I realized that that was about how long I could afford to travel for. I had started planning my backpacking trip about 6 or 7 months before my departure date, and in that time I knew I was able to save up $2,000 a month until then. So by the time that my departure date came, I had all that money in my bank account and I was ready to go. So basically what you want to do now is write down how much you think you will need a month based off of your research of researching how expensive these countries are and how much you're going to be spending on food and on transportation and on hostels. Put that all together for 1 month, take into consideration how much you can save a month up until the day that you want to leave, and come up with that number of how long you'll be gone for. Everybody's situation is different and unique, so I can't speak for absolutely everybody, but if you want more help from me on this, please comment down below and I will definitely help you as best as I can. All right, step 6 is going to be narrowing it down a little bit. So in step 1, I told you that you should list all of the countries that you want to go to. But now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. So one example of a place that I didn't really want to give up but felt like it was necessary and logical for me to give up was Santorini, Greece, because it was very, very far from everything else that I was seeing. And to be honest, I don't really know much about the rest of Greece. I just really know that I wanted to see Santorini, but I was like, is that really worth being on I think it was about a 14 or 15 hour train ride from Croatia, which was the lowest point in Europe I was going to be at if I didn't go to Santorini. And Santorini is also very expensive and I would have to get on another boat, which was not covered by my Eurail pass. So I was like, is this really necessary for this backpacking trip, or can I save that until later? And I decided to save that until another time. And same goes for Norway, and it really breaks my heart because I wanted to go to Norway so badly, but it was very out of the way. I couldn't get a train ticket that I didn't have to pay extra for without a reservation, and the plane tickets, to get to Norway were probably the most expensive country to go to within Europe. And I decided that I kind of needed to save that money because Norway is another very expensive country to go and visit. And one thing that I really would have wanted to see in Norway is the Northern Lights, and there was not a Eurail station stop on my pass. So I wouldn't have even been able to go to Tromsø. I'm not really sure how you say it. So kind of narrow it down and see all of the places that are kind of more close together or more doable without so much space in between. Because at the end of the day, I'm assuming you're trying to save time and money with your trip too. At least that's what I tried to do. I tried to make the most of my 5 months and do as much as I possibly could. All right, step 7 is basically going to be you're gonna wanna set yourself a daily budget. At this point, you know how long you're going to be going away for, you know your average price of hostels and transportation and food and everything that you're going to need. So when I broke it down from the amount of my budget to the amount of days I was going to be away, I came up with a grand total of $76 a day. And that accounts for everything. So if your hostel is $40 a night, that means you have $37 left to spend during the day, whether that be on food, Uber, or activities. It was really great when I was in Hungary and my hostel was only $7 a day because then I was able to spend $70 that day and do whatever I want with that $70 without feeling guilty about it. And I'm just gonna show you guys real quick of how I kept track of my daily budget because I really like writing things out and making lists and stuff. So I would write down my accommodation, how much that would cost, how much I spent on food and drinks, and then I would write down how much I spent total for that day. And then I would also write down how much I had left over. So if my budget daily was $76 and I spent about $39, I would have about $37 left over from the day, leaving my complete total left over to be $37. And when I move on to day 2, I would once again account for how much my hostel cost, how much I spent on food and drinks, how much I spent total, and then how much I had left over from that day, and then I would put that with my complete total left over. So I knew that if there was something really cool that I wanted to do in a country that may cost $100, I have this little bit of extra money kind of put away from the days that I didn't spend too much. But I would keep everything really organized because it's important to know how much money you're spending and how much you have left. Even if you could see it in your bank account, you always want to keep in mind how much your monthly and daily budget is so you don't go over it and don't run out of money too soon. Okay, so now you're on to step 8, and step 8 is diving deeper into your itinerary that you're making. So I like having an itinerary to follow, but it's not a strict itinerary, and if I want to do something else that I wrote down, it's not a big deal because at the end of the day, I wrote it. But it is nice to have something to follow in case you're kind of like, well, I'm stumped. I don't really know what to do for the day. And it's also a good idea to map out the cost of the things that you want to see in each city. If there's a tour you want to take, like I wanted to do the Cliffs of Moher tour, and I only knew I wanted to do that because I researched it before I went to Ireland. What you're going to want to do is take each country. Start with the one that makes you most excited so you really feel like diving deeper into this. Let's say Switzerland. The first thing I would do is learn everything that I could about Switzerland. Learn about the coolest towns that were still within my budget, learn about the places that I wanted to eat, the activities that I wanted to do, things that I wanted to see, and I found all this out by going on blogs and watching vlogs and websites and Facebook groups, even typing in things like, oh, the weirdest thing to see in Switzerland, the most unique thing to see in Switzerland, the craziest thing to see in Switzerland, and you just get all of these articles about things that you've probably never heard of. And then write those all down because that's going to be really important when you're planning that full itinerary, which is our next step. So now let's just say, for example, you have 10 countries on your list that you want to hit, and now you have a bunch of things under each country listed that you definitely want to see. Now it's time to plan your actual itinerary. And the reason that this itinerary is so important is not just so you have a plan, but so you know how you're getting from point A to B to C to D and everywhere in between. Because it's like, sure, I'm right after Spain, I'm going to Switzerland, but okay, how am I getting there? Which train am I taking? Like, you're gonna have to know these things, and you don't wanna leave them till the last minute because that's when things go wrong. And also, when you're planning your itinerary, you wanna do it in the most efficient way to get from these places so you're not bouncing all around Europe and wasting time on a train when you could be spending in any of these countries. You wanna know which paths to take so you're spending the least amount of time on the train. And things may change when you get out there, but that's fine. That happens. It happened to me. I was originally going to go to Bali, but I went to Hawaii instead. Things happen. Writing out your itinerary is going to take a very long time. It took me months. It wasn't even completed by the time I left for Europe because things keep changing. But it was really good and comforting to know that I did have my first month planned out. So once I really got into the swing of things out there, it was easier to plan as I was going along the way. And now we are on to the most exciting step, step 10. Do it. You planned everything out, you researched every country, you're so excited. You have probably not a finished itinerary, but the means of having maybe half finished one. So I would say about 3 to 4 months before you plan on leaving is when you should buy your plane ticket and really set that date. Don't wait until the last minute, but also don't do it like a year ahead of time. I would say 3 to 4 months. That's when I did it, and I got my plane ticket from New York to Ireland for $183. That's like the perfect time to book your trip. And then it really gives you a set date of when you know that you're leaving to help you prepare for it better. But also, please don't forget to get travel insurance. Nobody likes paying for insurance, and yes, it's expensive. And if something happens to you and you don't know where you are and you break a bone, or I don't know, worst case scenario, things get stolen, you want to be covered. So definitely do your research before. There are a lot of different travel insurance companies that you can get from, but you just gotta find the one that suits you best. And about a month before is when I would book your first 4 hostels. I was always booking places 4 in advance at a time because you don't want to book every single thing for your entire trip. I would kind of just book it country by country because your plans can change. And some places don't offer refunds, some places make you pay more if you want like that free cancellation. But at the end of the day, it's kind of just easier to just do 4 in advance, unless it's say Oktoberfest, book further in advance for that if you know you're gonna be there during those certain dates, because those places are going to sell out very quickly. But this way you always know where you're going to be for say the next week or 2, and you have that feeling of comfort, but at the same time you can be spontaneous and be like, actually I'm gonna go here next instead of here. And a month before is also when I'd say book if you have any buses that you need to book. Like I took buses around Ireland instead of using the URL, and I booked those a little bit in advance just so I knew I had a seat on that bus when the time came. And last but not least, you're gonna have to buy a backpack, or I guess you could buy a rolling suitcase, but I was already carrying something rolling, so I needed something on my back. And you're going to want to list out every single thing that you're gonna want to put in your backpack. I also made another video that I'm going to link down below of everything that I brought with me when I traveled Europe, and I know the title says Bali, but I went to Hawaii and they're kind of tropically similar. But get used to packing and unpacking your bag if you're not used to living out of a backpack. It's good to learn how to pack it to be the most efficient when you're out there. So I hope this video helped you plan your first European backpack adventure. It was the most exciting thing I ever did in my entire life. And I'm sure you can do it and be spontaneous, but I didn't really have any major problems with my trip, and I believe that is because I spent so much time with my pre-planning for it. If you guys have any more questions, I'd be happy to help. Please leave me a comment down below or message me on my Instagram directly, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Happy travels, and I will catch y'all on the next one.